everyone, I am Sammy, your devoted manga otaku, and welcome to my manga space. Today I will be discussing all the manga I read in August. I thought I'd have a little Wednesday Addams moment since I read so many creepy manga this month for the Spooky Smart Bitch Readathon. If you haven't watched my TBR for the readathon, I suggest you check it out. I wasn't able to read everything on my TBR, but whatever I couldn't get to, I plan on reading in the next couple months. Aside from the spooky manga though, I did manage to read some other fun manga titles. As always, you can jump around my reviews by using the timestamps provided. And with that, I invite you to grab a coffee or other beverage of your choice and let's talk manga. The first manga I'm going to be talking about today is Helter, Skelter, Fashion Unfriendly by Kyoko Okazaki. The best way to describe this manga is it's like watching a car accident or a train derailing. You know it's going to end terribly, but you can't look away. The story follows Lilico, Japan's most celebrated supermodel, but her career is beginning to thrive beyond the world of modeling. She's everywhere, from movie and talk show appearances to singing and gossip magazines. Despite her overwhelming success though, Lilico is unhappy. She's bored, she's exhausted, and she's paranoid that someone will discover her darkest secret. Her body and face are fake. Basically, she's been reconstructed from a series of gruesome and experimental cosmetic procedures that are maintained with copious amounts of drugs and routine operations. Regardless of her suffering, Lilico is still desperate to stay attractive and relevant, but when she realizes her body is starting to betray her, her mind begins to shatter. First and foremost, I really enjoyed the characters and I was invested in their dark and twisted lives. I thought Lilico was interesting in terms of how she made me feel. I found myself pitying her at times, but it's really hard to be sympathetic for her because she's a terrible person. When she's not in front of a camera, she's shallow, foul, narcissistic, and unpredictable, using her influence to manipulate and abuse anyone she can sink her claws into. The people around Lilico are just as vile. They both try to please her and also spite her when the opportunity presents itself, which proves how superficial and cutthroat people in the entertainment industry can be to gain more money and more power. This story exposes the disturbing reality of what fame can create. Lilico is an extreme example of what the entertainment industry's demanding and unrealistic beauty standards can do to people. But it's not just the industries that are to blame. Okazaki sensei also sheds light on how society has to share the blame. Helter Skelter analyzes the issues with celebrity idolizing culture and how society values beauty and perfection above all else. It also examines our, as in the fans, constant need to know everything about a celebrity's personal life, including all the dirty details, how fans love gossip columns and scandals. We all play a role. Now, despite enjoying the overall premise and the characters within the story, I did feel an overall incompleteness when it came to the writing. Personally, I found the ending really confusing, and sometimes the plot jumps between different storylines without any clarification. In the afternotes, I read that Okazaki sensei suffered from a severe accident before this book's release, which accounts for why the manga feels unpolished in places. As for the art, I thought that it paired well with the narrative. It's chaotic like the story itself, I do wish the characters were more easily recognizable from each other. Sometimes I was confused as to who is on the page. Because of the accident, the manga art was never put through a refining process. Nevertheless, I think the art matches the story really well. It almost gives me Joker from Batman vibes, just a little bit. In summary, I think that this manga was compelling and entertaining. I had a hard time putting it down. I'm giving it 3.5 stars. It was a little rough around the edges, but I enjoyed the realism surrounding the characters and the narrative. It felt like a true account of a celebrity struggling with the human cost of fame and beauty. The second series I'm going to be talking about today is volumes 1 and 2 of the collector's edition of Mermaid Saga by Rumiko Takahashi. When I started reading this, I was expecting a linear story, but Mermaid Saga is more of a short story collection. The narrative follows Yuta, a man who unwittingly ate mermaid flesh, cursing him with immortality. Yuta yearns to lead a normal life where he can have a normal relationship, grow old, and eventually die. And these short stories chronicle his adventures of searching for a mermaid that will cure him and make him mortal again. He spends the next couple hundred years investigating rumors and old wives' tales until meeting a 15-year-old girl named Mana. After stumbling into her village and uncovering its mysterious origins, the narrative jumps between Yuta's past adventures and his journey with Mana. First off, I want to acknowledge that Takahashi sensei is an exceptional storyteller and her world building is excellent. It's imaginative and creative. I enjoyed the episodic nature of this manga and how the storytelling spanned over centuries. I loved learning about the lore of the mermaids, the different ailments of consuming mermaid flesh, and the lengths humanity will go for a taste of immortality. A criticism I have about this series is how open-ended the conclusion was. Just to give you an idea of how abrupt this series ended, I saw a bunch of people on Goodreads commenting how they were looking forward to volume 3 of the collector's editions. Do you want to tell them? I don't want to tell them. I have so many unanswered questions, and there are some confusing lore and story elements that I thought were going to be explained later in the story, but were never revisited. Also, readers are introduced to a revolving door of characters. Some have definitive endings, but some characters are never seen again, and that makes me kind of sad. This manga piqued my curiosity in so many ways, and I just wish we had more. I don't know if Takahashi sensei ended the story this way on purpose, but if she ever decides to revisit the series, I would be ecstatic. Takahashi sensei, if you're watching, please consider making more Mermaid Saga. Lastly, I want to mention how much I adore her art style. I like how distinctive it is. Honestly, I feel like some of the character designs in Mermaid Saga might have been the original inspiration and concept for some characters in Inuyasha. Plus the mermaids and the monsters, I just love how they were drawn. They're so creepy and cool. Overall, I'm going to give this series 3.5 stars. I would have enjoyed it more if it wasn't for the ambiguous ending. I felt like I just needed some more closure, but I still think this is worth a read, especially if you enjoy horror, action, and dark and creepy monsters. Okay, so far I've talked about dark horror themed manga, and now I want to talk about a manga I read that was the exact opposite of those things, and that's volume 1 of I Think Our Son is Gay by Okura. The narrative is told from the perspective of a stay-at-home mother named Tomoko, who is raising 2 sons, often by herself because her husband is away for work a lot. Tomoko starts seeing glimpses and clues that her eldest son, Hiroki, might be gay. Instead of confronting him, she decides to wait patiently, hoping her son will feel comfortable enough to eventually open up. Until then, she opts to cheering and supporting him from the sidelines. This manga is a very cute and heartwarming slice of life comedy. It was adorable watching Tomoko recall past memories and incidents, trying to connect them to future observations and ultimately come to the conclusion that her son is probably gay. I also think he might be gay, just from what I've seen. The narrative gets a little repetitive at times, but overall I think Volume 1 does a great job of introducing the characters. I want to note that Yuri, the little brother, is my favorite character so far, and I hope he gets more screen time in future volumes because his reactions and comments were priceless. I really loved that even though the manga is super sweet with very little drama so far, it does shed light on some touchy subjects, including discrimination and acceptance. Also, Hiroki's father obviously loves his son, but he's oblivious and unwittingly makes it harder for Hiroki to come out. These moments might be eye-opening scenes for some straight readers and parents who are striving to be better allies. The art style is extremely cute. The facial expressions are over the top and cartoony, and they kind of remind me of Pokemon. Very cute, almost not chibi-like, but very round faces, very big eyebrows, big expressions too. I love the art. It's adorable. I'm giving this series 4 stars. I'll definitely be purchasing future volumes as they release, and I look forward to exploring this parental perspective more. This next manga is a classic Lovecraftian horror, and that's the 3-in-1 deluxe edition of Uzumaki by Junji Ito. This manga is probably one of the weirdest and creepiest manga I have ever read, but it was also mesmerizing. You're lured into the story through the spell of the spiral. Uzumaki tells the tale of Koruzo-cho, a rural coastal town in Japan. One by one, the townsfolk in this town begin suffering a series of supernatural occurrences related to one simple geometric shape, the spiral. It started with one man's seemingly harmless obsession with spiraled objects, but slowly the plague begins to spread, spiraling out of control and unraveling horror. The storyline for this manga is like nothing I've ever read before. It's just so weird and unique. It's also frustrating at times. For example, I felt like the townsfolk were idiots. They weren't taking things seriously, and even after seeing the most horrendous, unexplainable horrors, these townfolk just brush it off. What I found helped me understand and appreciate the storytelling a bit better was to imagine the story being a literal nightmare. Sometimes in dreams, things aren't explained or don't fully make sense, but that doesn't take away from the horror that one might observe or experience in the nightmare. The chapters in Uzumaki narrate short stories that weave and twist together, forming a more structured plot in the last half of the book. I was still a little disappointed that some of my favorite stories were never revisited, especially the hospital segment. That was incredibly traumatic for me. When reading some reviews of Uzumaki, I wasn't surprised to see some people criticizing the events in the last half of the book, and I agree with some of those criticisms. It is so bleak, and there isn't a whole lot of closure in the finale, at least there wasn't for me, but I believe that comes with the territory of reading cosmic horror. You'll never get all the answers. The reader is like a resident of this town, and you have to draw your own conclusions from the events you're witnessing. There isn't a villain with a monologue to explain why this is all happening. I would say that the greatest strength of Uzumaki and my favorite component of this manga is Ito Sensei's hauntingly beautiful artwork. No matter how twisted and bizarre the narrative gets, the images portray the horror perfectly. It's the type of imagery that has a lasting effect and can never truly be forgotten. Whenever I see a spiral, I will be reminded of Ito Sensei's gory and realistic imagery in Uzumaki. I'm giving a total of 4 stars. I recommend this to anyone who loves Lovecraftian tales and can stomach the disturbing body horror. This omnibus has got me super hyped for the anime coming out next year. Seeing the imagery in this come to life on like the big screen, it's going to be delightfully gruesome. Now, Mieruko-chan by Tomoki Izumi is a manga I don't hear a lot of people talk about, and it's a real shame because this series is worthy of a following. I was able to read volumes 1 through 3 of this series this month, and I'm really impressed with it so far. Essentially, it's about a girl who suddenly starts seeing and hearing terrifying apparitions. After the first volume, I was worried that this manga was going to be gimmicky and repetitive, with the narrative following Miko from one scary encounter to the next. But by the 3rd volume, I was pleasantly surprised with how much the series transformed. With each volume, we're learning more about the supernatural beings and Miko's powers. It's still too early to really understand the full scope of what's going on, but it's very mysterious. The 3rd volume is my favorite so far because the plot is starting to thicken and the narrative seems to be taking a darker turn. I'm curious to see if the next volume is going to follow this darker shift, or if it's going to be a little lighter. This manga has the potential to touch on some really tender and heartwarming moments, but for spoilery reasons, I cannot disclose why. Now, I might get some flack for this, but I actually think the monsters in this series are the scariest monsters I've seen so far in horror manga, and is comparable to the imagery I witnessed in Uzumaki. In every volume, the horror gets kicked up a notch, and the ghouls keep getting more grotesque and spine-chilling. The illustrations in general become grander, and there's a surprising amount of action. Got a little toilet monster there. Literally terrifying. Like, no thank you. One last note, I've seen some people comment that they've dropped this series because of some fan servicey moments in the 1st volume. From what I can tell, the fan service is largely snuffed out by the 3rd volume, so if that was turning you off of the series, maybe give it another go. Also, it's like very mild fan service compared to what I've seen in other manga. For now, I'm going to give this series a 4.5 star rating. It balances slice of life, comedy, and horror beautifully. And if you're a fan of any of those genres, I really recommend that you give this a read. Now, I read this newly released manga volume earlier this month because I needed to know what happened next. And that's volume 3 of A Sign of Affection by Morishita. I'm not going to talk about this too much since I talked about this series quite a bit in my last wrap-up video, but I will say that I'm extremely pleased with the developments in this volume. This manga is about a deaf university student named Yuki who is smitten by a boy that takes interest in learning sign language to better communicate with her. This series also sheds light on challenges and discrimination the deaf community faces in society. So many wonderful things happen in this, and my heart is overjoyed with how the romantic elements keep ramping up with each installment. Honestly, I adore everything about this manga. I enjoy the plot, the characters, the pacing, the representation, the art. It's all written and illustrated with love and care. Plus, I get the warmest, fuzziest feelings while reading this series. Like its predecessors, this manga gets 5 stars from me. If you like heartwarming, feel-good, romantic manga with slice-of-life themes and little drama, you should buy this. I just wish I didn't have to wait until December to see what happens next. This next manga has won the award for being my favorite yaoi of all time. Yes, I loved it that much, and so did everyone else apparently, because it was ranked number 1, the number 1 romance manga, and the number 1 yaoi and LGBTQ+ manga according to Amazon's bestsellers rank. I am of course talking about volume 1 of Dick Fight Island by Reibun. I bought this because the cover art, title, and overall hype made me curious, and it did not disappoint. The story follows a society comprised of 8 clans, and every 4 years, each clan selects a champion to represent them. These champions then compete for the throne and title of king. Now, I assumed that the armor that these men are wearing on their genitalia were weapons, and that's true to some extent, but the armor is mostly there to protect their junk from being manhandled. You see, to win this battle of endurance, champions are paired off and battle one-on-one, not until one is beaten bloody, but until one competitor ejaculates, declaring them the loser. It's a battle to see who comes last. This manga is absurd and absolutely ridiculous, but the plot is actually really interesting and well written. You can tell that Ike Sensei put a lot of thought into developing the clans, and I enjoyed learning about the lore before the battles. Also, even though there's a huge cast of characters, I felt like they all had distinctive personalities and features. The subplots are surprisingly romantic and interesting. I found myself becoming invested in the characters. I was shipping couples. I was melting over heartwarming moments and laughing at the ridiculousness and silliness of it all. The art in this is fantastic. It's beautiful and proportionate and anatomically magnificent. The combat and action scenes are drawn just as tastefully as the erotic moments, and I was surprised at how uncensored the graphics were compared to other yaoi I've read. I'm giving Dick Fight Island 5 stars. I'm sold on this series, and it's certainly worth the hype. This quick read was hilarious, sweet, and spicy. Also, I could see myself rereading this just for the giggles. I highly recommend Dick Fight Island. It's an insane amount of fun, and I cannot wait for volume 2. And last but not least, we're going to end this manga wrap-up on a very creepy note. This month I read volumes 1 through 6 of Blood on the Tracks by Shuzo Oshimi. I binged them all in 2 reading spurts, and wow, this story is very, very, very unsettling. I don't want to say too much about the storyline because it'll ruin the shock and awe of the narrative, but I will say a lot of the fear and uneasiness I feel when reading this stems from the narrative's unpredictability. Just when I feel like I know the direction of the story and the characters, the manga switches to a completely different direction, and I feel like I can't get my footing. At this point in the story, literally anything could happen, and it's kind of terrifying. Oshimi sensei is a master at writing psychological horror and a master at drawing emotion. He's also very skilled at drawing anatomically accurate characters. The facial close-ups in this are so well drawn. You can even see the muscles being strained in the characters' expressions. His ability to trigger a feeling of uneasiness in me through a drawing of someone smiling or laughing, it makes me super uncomfortable. Also, Oshimi sensei's cross-hatching technique, it infuses a lot of texture and depth and darkness to the drawings and the panels. One last thing about this manga that I wanted to touch on in terms of the art was how Oshimi sensei was able to capture trauma, specifically when a person can't speak. I guess it's a combination of the art and his writing. So in the past, I have experienced anxiety and panic attacks that have caused a tightness in my chest and throat, and it creates this lump in your throat. And no matter how hard you try, talking is incredibly difficult. And it's not that you choose not to speak, it's that you physically can't speak because of the tension. When a character in this book experiences this, it was drawn so eerily accurate. I was having flashbacks reading it, and although I haven't experienced that in many years, I still have nightmares where I watch horrible things happen and I try to call 911 or like call out, but like no sound comes out of me and I just feel like tight and closed up. It's an absolutely horrific feeling, and I feel like Oshimi sensei nailed it. This is a 5-star manga for me. The writing paired with the illustrations are so powerful and effective. It checks all my boxes. I will say that this won't be for everyone. It deals with disturbing subject matter, including physical, sexual, and psychological abuse. Personally, I'm all for it. I welcome dark themes in manga. I'm really excited to dive into some of Oshimi sensei's other works. I recently bought Flowers of Evil, so I'll probably read that next. What's your favorite Shuzo Oshimi manga title? Let me know in the comments section below. And with that, we have finally come to the end of my August manga wrap-up. If you've read any of this manga, let me know what you thought of them in the comments section below. I'm really impressed with what I read in August, but it was mostly dark and gloomy. I admit I'm excited to dive into some lighter themed manga in September. If you're interested in watching more videos from me, you can check out my end card where I'll have links to my most recent videos. I hope you all have a manga-nificent day, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!